And now we will hear from Mr. Michalchyshyn. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Senator. My colleague Otis Zakadatsky is joining us by video link and will assist with any questions, but I'll do the opening statement right now. Again, thank you very much for the invitation to join this committee, and thank you to the Ambassador for her excellent presentation and for the great work that her team and her are doing in these difficult circumstances. So for those who are not familiar with our organization, the Ukrainian Canadian Congress is the voice of Canada's Ukrainian community. Together with our member organizations, provincial councils, and branches, we are the leading, coordinating, and representing body for the interests of the self-identified 1.4 million strong Ukrainian Canadian community. And we've been active in this since 1940. And we work to shape Canada's social, economic, and political landscape. Before we talk about the war in Ukraine, I wanted to also take a moment to thank all Canadians, and especially senators in this room, who have, in the last 15 months, come together to donate, to fundraise, and to demonstrate support for Ukraine, and to literally open our homes to Ukrainians who've come to Canada to seek refuge from Russia's war. And I would note to our friends from Newfoundland, I just saw an extraordinary documentary that I'll send along to you called Rest Ashore, which is particularly poignant in how that province has welcomed Ukrainians to that province. The generosity and kindness that Canadians have shown will always be remembered by our community and by Ukrainians and by the Ukrainian people. This year, the UCC and the Canada-Ukraine Foundation, or CUF, have jointly formed the Ukrainian Humanitarian Appeal, which has raised over $60 million for humanitarian projects in Ukraine. As the ambassador noted, last Thursday was International Children's Day, a day which Russia marked by firing missiles at Ukraine's capital and killing a 9-year-old girl and her mother. Subsequently, there have been many other missile attacks, thankfully most of them shot down, but there have been over 480 children killed in Ukraine since the beginning of the war and over 980 wounded. Ukraine has identified also 19,000 Ukrainian children that Russia has deported or illegally separated from their parents. The actual numbers, murdered, injured, or stolen by Russia, are likely to be far higher. The trauma and devastation that Russia is inflicting on the Ukrainian people will affect generations to come. We know that the Office of the General Prosecutor is investigating over 80,000 instances of war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by the Russian invaders. Mass rape, torture, murder, forced deportation, mass abduction of children. These are the litany of horrible crimes that are happening this year as Russia commits its war against Ukraine. Important to note that these are not random crimes. These are not actions of a few rogue soldiers. These are deliberate, systematic, and part of Russian military state policy. These are the crimes by which Russia seeks to destroy the Ukrainian people. The cruelty is not incidental. The cruelty is their point. Russia is a criminal state which should be isolated from the international community. Canada's House and Canada's Senate have unanimously recognized Russia's actions in Ukraine as acts of genocide and called for the government to list the Russian mercenary group Wagner as a terrorist entity, and we would call on the Government of Canada, Global Affairs Canada, to implement this. The UCC has consistently argued that the Russian Federation must be designated a state sponsor of terror, and that the 81 Russian diplomats present in Canada, and I use the word diplomat loosely, must be expelled. I ask the committee for your support in this call. The UCC and our community applaud the assistance that Canada has provided to Ukraine, including over $4.5 billion in government loans and over $1 billion in weapons. And as the ambassador mentioned, the strong people-to-people links of the over 35,000 soldiers, Ukrainian Armed Forces soldiers, who have been trained by Operation Unifier. We're very proud to know that the Canadian Armed Forces continue to train their counterparts in the Ukrainian Armed Forces, in Latvia, in the United Kingdom, and we welcome all these announcements of increases in training size. However, more assistance from Canada and our allies needs to follow. Unfortunately, in Budget 2023, we did not see major investments by Canada in Ukrainian defense. A few observations on military assistance from our perspective. First, Ukraine needs far more heavy weapons that we and our allies than we and our allies are providing right now, specifically tanks, armored personnel carriers, air defense systems, long-range missile systems, naval defense, artillery, and ammunition for each of these systems. Next, Ukraine needs fighter jets to protect its skies and to continue to deny Russian air superiority. Several of our Canadian allies, for example, Poland and Slovakia, have committed to deliver jets to Ukraine. The fighter jet coalition that is taking shape a little belatedly, but is taking place, includes several key NATO allies, including the US and the United Kingdom, and that is a key for Ukraine's future defense. We believe Canada can play a key role in this by training Ukrainian pilots on NATO jets, such as the F-16, and in working with other allies on the need to supply Ukraine with more fighter jets in the future. The security of both Canada, our European allies, and Ukraine requires a sustained commitment to increasing production and procurement of weapons and ammunition. We look forward to the Canadian government making multi-year investments to ensure we have the stockpiles to deal with the current and future Russian aggression. Once Ukraine defeats Russia in this war, Russia will still remain an enemy of Ukraine, an adversary to NATO, and a threat to peace in the world. We need to be prepared. As Ukraine's Defense Minister Reznikov said on May 31st at the CANSEC conference, a list of high-tech Canadian equipment that Ukraine needs has been provided to the government. We urge our government to work closely with industry to fulfill these needs as quickly as possible. We stress the urgency of what Canada can do in the immediate weeks and days. The longer we wait to make decisions to deliver aid to Ukraine, the more Ukrainians are killed, soldiers and civilians, the more are wounded, the more are injured, the larger the price Ukraine pays. It's our fervent hope that Ukraine's allies, Canada key among them, will deliver this aid with the tools that are needed to win in the near future. Finally, as the NATO summit approaches in July in Vilnius, we know that Canada has consistently supported Ukraine's membership in the NATO alliance. The summit is a historic opportunity to move from the open door policy framework to the concrete and practical implementation of that open door. We hope Canada will use its good offices to ensure that emerging from the Vilnius summit, there will be a roadmap for Ukraine's membership in NATO, because we know the future of Europe and indeed the world depends on it. And I'd be pleased to answer any questions along with my colleague, Orest Zakharovsky.